Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Self-Published Success, a show that highlights forward-thinking authors who chose self-publishing over traditional and found success in doing so. My name is John Feldman, founder and CEO of Visionary Literary, and your host for today's show. Our guest today is Paul Attaway, and Paul is the author of two novels, Blood in the Low Country and its sequel, Eli's Redemption. Paul was born and raised in the Atlanta, Georgia area, and then Paul and his wife moved to Phoenix, Arizona in 1988, where he embarked on a 30-year business career before retiring, where he found his passion for fiction writing. Paul and Lynn raised their three children together in Phoenix and now live in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina. Paul, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Good. So tell me again, that was a very short bio in the intro. Before we hit record, we were talking a little bit about you and your background and your adventures. So tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself, right? About the career that you had, and then what brought you into writing.
Yeah, how did I get here? Okay, so I moved to Phoenix in 1988, and I was an attorney for about 2 years. I was actually in law school for 3 years. I was only an attorney for two. It just didn't take. And then from there, I moved into the world of small business, and was always grateful for my law school education. I learned to think. I learned critically. I learned to read and write more effectively, more efficiently in law school. But after 2 years, I really wanted to move into the business world. Initially, I worked for my father. He manufactured building materials out of Georgia, which is where I was from. After 5 years with him, I went out on my own and started about three different businesses along the way, all small business. So I'm infinitely or intricately familiar with just about every aspect of small business, manufacturing, patent portfolio management, bookkeeping, accounting, raising debt, raising equity, managing investors, managing lenders, managing customers, employees, et cetera. But after 30 plus years of that, I was a bit burned out, and we'd become empty nesters, my wife and I. But I was too young to retire. So I became a consultant, and I was basically an executive for hire for some small businesses in Phoenix. Did a few projects, raised some money for a couple of small companies. I joke that consultant is Latin for "can you raise me money?" And did that. But again, it wasn't bringing me a tremendous amount of satisfaction. So I was between gigs, and my wife and I, we read a lot, and I'd finish a book, and sometimes I'd say, "Wow, that was a great book." Other times I'd finish a book and I'd go, I could do that. And so I joke now, my wife got sick and tired of hearing me say that. So she basically kicked me out of the house and said, fine, go write a book. I said, all right, I will. So in some respects, it was really to see if I could do it. And I was between consulting gigs. My wife and I at that time had purchased a small house in Charleston, and we would go there for a couple of weeks. We'd come back to Phoenix, and I know everybody today thinks they can work remotely, and some people can. I guess I'm old school. I grew up going to an office, liking an office, needing an office. So the idea of working for other people, remotely, at least back in 2017. Wasn't really clicking. So I was like, okay, we want to spend more time in Charleston. I got to find something to do. And I decided, well, I'm going to see if I can't write a book. And that's how it got started. And I proceeded to read a lot of books on how to write books, read a lot of blogs on how to write books, and set out on my way to writing a book. And that's how it got started.
Good. Well, and I'm sure that all those years of writing, like you said, you and your wife are both avid readers. So all those years of writing gave you, some education as well, some informal education.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the writing in and of itself is not a discipline that was foreign to me. As I mentioned earlier, I learned to read and write in law school. And in the business world, say what you mean what you say. And I really worked hard on getting any document I needed to write down in as few pages as possible, 1 page at most if possible. So I wrote everything from installation instructions for for products, PR material, newsletters to customers, newsletters to investors, disclosure statements for offering documents. I mean, I wrote everything for my small business. So writing was not a discipline that I had to, relearn. It's not like I hadn't been writing all these years. But what was different, of course, though, was the art of storytelling and figuring out how to build a story. So I have a style of writing. I never really thought about it that I had a style, but as I've now written 2 books and I've talked to others, the style is there, and to some extent, it's driven by what it is I write, or I should say they go together, my writing style and the genre that I write. But the real work around writing my first book came in trying to figure out, literally, how do you start? Where do you start? And, what are you doing actually? So the story engineering is where I focused a lot.
So where did the overall, I guess, concept come from, right? Because you wrote a fiction story, Blood in the Low Country, and I know, so that's one thing that you touch on also, I saw on your website, is that you like to write about, I guess, that Southern life, right? Bringing you back to your upbringing in Georgia and then being back in South Carolina. So tell us about your passion there.
Well, it's funny because, returning to South Carolina, I've fallen back in love with the South. It has been a homecoming of sorts for me. My family still lives in the South. My siblings, my parents have passed on. My wife's from Los Angeles. She loves the South. But I think part of it was some of the advice that you'll get when you sit down to write is write what you know. Whether you're doing fiction or nonfiction, obviously nonfiction, of course, you better be writing what you know. But in fiction, you write what you know. It's easier. You don't have to go and learn a whole new subject matter. So, okay, so what did I know? I knew what it was like to grow up in the South. And the South has a definite feel and culture to it. I mean, we have an entire genre, Southern literature, Southern fiction. There's not necessarily a Northern literature. I mean, there is a culture to living in the South, and you can talk about it in terms of the food, the music. It's slower because of the climate. College football. I mean, there's of course, there's the really dark, ugly side if you go back to the antebellum times, but there is still a very vibrant, positive aspect to living in the South. So when I sat down to write what I know, I go, well, I know a couple of things. I know what it's like to grow up in the South. I had a phenomenal relationship with my father, so I figured I could write about father-son relationships. And he passed away way too early. And so I go, okay, that was my starting point. So we were, living in Charleston, and we now live there permanently. We sold our place in Phoenix a couple of years ago. So we were moving that direction. And if you know anything about Charleston, if you've ever been there, it's an extraordinary city. There's so much history. So it's a great setting for a book. So I had my setting. I was born in 1963, so I knew what it was like to be a teenager in the 70s. So I kind of had my setting, had my time, and had a general idea of how I wanted the book to go. And so that's where that's how it got started.
Excellent. Well, good. I mean, yeah, it always write what you know is easier. And when you're not so focused on, I guess, beating your head against the wall, trying to get the story out. If you have the story and if you know it, the writing can come out much more naturally. So
absolutely. Yeah.
That's a good starting point. So speaking of natural writing, of good writing, of flow, I want to talk more about what you did with your story, right? So self-published success. We want to talk about the routes that you went, but I first have to stop and I have to jump forward because the listeners need to know that you have 417 reviews for Blood in the Low Country, your first book, on Amazon right now. So
Yes.
as a self-published author, that's incredible, because you see so many self-published books that have 0, 1, 2 single-digit reviews. I mean, I'm sure anyone listening who's a self-published author is their jaw dropped when they heard 417 reviews, because that's a lot for a self-published title. Tell us, and again, there's not, we were talking
Yeah.
about beforehand, there's not an A equals B. But what did you do? What are some tips, some advice that you can give to the listeners to gain a high number of reviews?
Yeah. I wish I did have that magic formula, because I'd write a book about it and sell millions of copies.
There you go.
But someone told me early on that selling a book is a marathon,
Yes.
not a sprint. That's probably been repeated a million times. And I can't focus on it every day, because it would just drive me up the wall. But I try to do at least 2 to 3 things every other day that are totally focused on selling the book, on promoting the book, which means then that I'm on other Facebook groups commenting. I'm I have an Instagram page, and so I post. I don't post as much as my support team wants me to, but I do post on Instagram. And I ran ads on Facebook, and I encourage people to support their fellow self-published authors. If you like a self-published author, the best way to support them is with a review. Actually, the best way is to buy their book. The second best way is with a review.
Right.
So I simply, anytime I was in a forum, I spoke about the power of the Amazon algorithm and the things that it pushes. And success breeds success. The more you sell, the higher you climb up in their algorithm. The more reviews you have, the higher you climb up their algorithm. So I just constantly promoted that. And I would blog about the life of a self-published author. And I ran Amazon ads. And so I think that at the end of the day, it's not any one thing. It's just really having your fingers in a lot of different pools, stirring things up and getting people to read your book. Now, that being said as well, most of my sales are Kindle. So I think about 65% of my sales are Kindle. The balance, the other 35% is paperback. Well, if you finish a Kindle book, right there at the end, it pops up and gives people an opportunity to review your book.
Right.
And so I think the fact that I'm selling more Kindles gives people an opportunity to immediately hit a star. So I think that's part of it. The other thing I think, and this is personal to me, is that I love a book that ends well. So many books you start out, you go, wow, great, I'm liking this book. And it just kind of peters out. Maybe you don't finish it or whatever. So I made a point of finishing my books on an upbeat note. Both my books finish on an upbeat note, and I have had people tell me I loved the ending. So they love the ending. Next thing you know, what do they see? An opportunity to review the book. You've got them in a good mood. Boom, 4 stars, 5 stars. I might even write something.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of it. I think a lot of books you read, and sometimes you go, wow, what a fantastic book. Others you're like, okay, I got to hurry up and finish this book. It's getting boring. I want to go start something else.
Yeah.
So to the extent your book finishes strong, I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Ending on a strong note, and again, because of the mood that you put your reader in. And then what you do make a very good point too about the e-readers, the automatic, do you want to leave a review for this
Right.
book, especially on Kindle? It goes on Amazon and then on Goodreads as well. So you can kind of 2 birds with 1 stone there. Okay.
The other things then that are, it pains me to have to do this, but giveaways. I start on Goodreads. I forget what I did. Did I do 50 free books or 100 free books? I forget which one. But if you're giving away an electronic copy, you're not, you're not spending money out of your pocket. It's a sale you didn't get, but it does seed your page with reviews. So I would say to anybody out there, as painful as it is, if you're going to give away your book, do it right out of the gate, because at least you're going to get the bang of the reviews. And the folks that are getting these free books, they don't know, hopefully they know that, frankly, their job is to give you a review. They're getting something for free. The only compensation we ask is their time to go on and leave you a review.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah. So advertising ebooks at the onset is something, again, like the traditional model is so different. Hardcovers always come out first because that's what they get their biggest returns. Yeah. Their gains from. But here again, self-publishing is much different. So when it comes to that, self-publishing versus traditional, right? Most people, again, when you came up with your idea, I want to write a book, you've been reading all of these books. Once you have the idea, you have it written down, you have the manuscript complete. What was your process, right? Did you try to go the traditional route of trying to get a literary agent, or did you say, I want to self-publish? Okay, so tell us about that. Tell us about your.
Yes. No, I wrote a book without any idea of how to publish the book. I knew that I would just simply figure it out when the time came. So as I finished the book, I'd finished my 50,000th draft, whichever draft it was, and I was ready. Then I was able to find an editor. And so while it's being edited, I then began the process. So I Google and learn how you're supposed to do it. And I put together my list of traditional publishers, but you can't go after the big publishers. You've got to find the agent. So I put together a list of agents. I found agents that had represented authors that had similar genre books, or that I thought my book was like the last book you promoted, et cetera, et cetera. I learned how to write a query letter. I wrote a query letter. I sent it off to probably 24 publishers. Now, I know we've all heard stories of people that send it to 100, not publishers, excuse me, agents, to 100 agents. More power to them. I think I stopped at around 25 or so. And I had been forewarned by what I read that you will either hear nothing or a no, possibly a yes. So 6 to 8 weeks go by. I think I had 3 no's and 20 odd non-responses. So I was impatient. I was waiting. I wanted action now. So I go back and I go, okay, publishers that are second tier publishers, they'll accept a manuscript directly from you. Great. So I went to their websites. I followed all the instructions perfectly. I sent out, another 15 to 20 or so. I had better success there. I received probably, 3 legitimate yeses from publishing houses and another couple of yeses from the hybrids that wanted me to pay the fees. I shied away from the hybrids. The publishing houses, they wanted me to do major rewrites, and it was going to take them a year to get my book out. I'm like, okay, well, whatever. Okay, what's this self-publishing I've been hearing about? So then I start reading about self-publishing and found a company that would, nuts and bolts, A to Z. Talk with them. Their pricing seemed fair and reasonable to the market. Signed with them, and the first box they were going to check was going to be to send me a proposed book cover design. So a week or so later, after about a 20-minute conversation with the designer, I get my book cover design. And my wife and I joked that they must have sent me the design for somebody else's book, because while it was professionally done, it just didn't work.
Right.
So I stepped away from them, talked to them, paid them a small fee to cover their expenses. We shook hands and parted ways. I went back to the Google and I found a consultant, and this was a woman who had 30 plus years experience. And she says, these are book cover designers I like. These are copy editors I like. This person will help you upload your files to Amazon and Instagram. So I effectively assembled a team, and I was able to publish my book. And by that means it's available ebook, paperback, and hardback through Amazon. My first book is available in Audible through Audible. It's available in audio format through Audible and another dozen or so platforms. And then Ingram Spark takes care of distribution through Barnes and Noble, Apple, and bookstores and libraries. So that's published. So I'm self-published. And then, of course, the third leg on the stool, you write it, you publish it. The third leg on the stool is you now have to sell it and market it. Being published is a great thing, but unless somebody knows it, you've just spent a lot of time and money to be published. So the third leg is selling and marketing.
Right. Well, so talking about your reviews beforehand, you obviously one thing that I caught on to was that you're very consistent, right? So when things don't seem to work, or if a new idea comes, you're all over it, and you're okay with doing that and putting in the time and the effort. The same thing took place when you were trying to find that publishing route. It seemed whatever wasn't working, you were like, okay, go on to the next, on to the next. I think that has to do, even though I know we said at the onset, right, that you were a business person, you don't like the word entrepreneur because you feel that you're not, but maybe that experience over the 3 decades of having to go through that as a business person, okay, this didn't work, on to the next, without being frustrated. Maybe that really came into play during this whole writing publishing process.
I appreciate it. No, thank you. It definitely helps. It has definitely helped. It can be frustrating. There's no doubt about it. But you can't just keep doing the same thing, banging your head against the wall and expect a different outcome. I think, and during all of this, I delivered a lot of information. I tried this, and this. Mm-hmm. Part of what surfaced throughout all of it is that, we'll leave the John Grishams and the Pattersons aside. They're in Daniel Silva, these phenomenally successful authors. They're over here. Even if I were to have landed a traditional publishing house, from what I had gathered, I still would have been expected to do a lot of the sales and marketing myself.
Right.
So as I look back on it, the Achilles heel of self-publishing is the bookstore. The only way you get into a bookstore really is you go and you knock on the door and you ask if they will carry your book. That's at least how you have to start. Mm-hmm. And I want to be in bookstores. So I do that. I work hard to get into bookstores, and I put together road shows and try to get out in front of people in a variety of ways. The traditional publishing can help you get into a bookstore because you'll be in their catalog and they have a sales team. And a bookstore knows that for you to have gotten picked up by that publisher, it's been edited, it's been professionally bound, there's a real genuine cover. It basically gives you a seal of approval.
Right.
As a self-publishing author, when I'm talking to bookstores, et cetera, I go, it's been professionally edited. I also have reviews from Kirkus Review and Prairie Review and Publishers Weekly. Here's my cover design. Here's the binding. This is all professionally done. So you basically have to take that head on, knowing that when you walk into a bookstore, they're rooting for you, but they're in the business too. They're in the business world, and the last thing they want to do, they can't read your book. They don't have time to read every book. Is they don't want to sell a book. Someone's going to walk back in and go, "This was garbage." So you have to overcome the unfortunate stigma that if you're self-published, there's going to be a lot of mistakes in it. So picking a good editor, giving that editor credit, and letting bookstores know, or anyone know, my book has been professionally edited. Here's reviews from Kirkus, etc. That helps overcome, the stigma.
Yeah, agreed. There definitely still is a stigma, even though, especially over the last couple of years with Ingram offering hardcovers and dust jackets, and now Amazon doing their beta testing with hardcovers. There's a lot to come, and it will get even more I guess, high quality, but there still is that little bit of a stigma, especially with bookstores. There's
Yes.
some really good points that you made too, because you can, if you distribute through Ingram, you can go into Barnes and Noble and ask them to order your copies, right? If a family member or friend, someone goes in and says, "Can you order this copy?" They can do it. But when it comes to placing them on shelves, that's when they get really, really iffy, because they have limited shelf space and so many titles published.
Right.
The points that you made are really good. Having that seal of approval helps them eliminate their, I
Yeah.
guess, their worries. But yeah, if everyone who self-publishes, if we can rid the self-publishing world of those, ebook only or 30-page low quality paperbacks, then um,
We'll all benefit.
we can all reap the benefits for sure.
Right.
But good. So Paul, what's next for you? Right. So you have your second book just came out recently. What's down the pipeline for you? Where can people?
Well, we've got with respect to the you can find me at paulattaway.com. My last name is Attaway, paulattaway.com, and that'll tell you more about me if you're interested and where you can find my books. I'm working on book 3, and over here on the floor I've got all these books I'm reading, a lot of research. So I'm working on book 3, also promoting book 2, and I'm putting together a road trip. I say me, my PR. There's a woman I work with who's excellent PR agent, and we're putting together a road trip to go and have as many public appearances as possible, to promote the book. So that'll be happening fourth quarter of this year and first quarter of next year, and hopefully have another book out within about a year.
Love that. I love, and again, everything you've been saying it throughout this interview, but you're self-published, but you had your own editorial team. You have your own cover designer.
Yep.
Everything a traditional publisher would have. You even have your own PR agency that you just listed.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. No, you have to.
Uh-huh.
You really do. It's overwhelming to try to do it all yourself. Now you have to pick and choose. Less money is of no object to you. You have to pick where you advertise, how you do it, but to have somebody else help you with it it's excellent.
Good. Well, Paul, this has been fantastic. We really appreciate you coming on, sharing all this information, telling us what you have done. Again, if this is for self-published authors or aspiring self-published authors, a lot of this information that you have come across over the years, putting together your teams, is not something that they would have considered or thought about. So this is definitely beneficial information, things that we can all look into. So congrats on your success, on all of your reviews. Looking forward to hearing more about how your PR goes, how the third book comes along, and how the second book finds the same success that the first one has found.
Yeah, well, thank you. And so to anyone who hears this, if you want to think out loud with me about what you're trying to do, you can contact me through my webpage. I'd be more than happy to share experiences with other self-published authors.
Excellent. That's very kind of you, Paul. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, John. Appreciate it.